Hello everyone, you're watching the monthly current affairs for the month January 2025 and today we'll be discussing important articles that appeared in last month's newspaper, particularly with respect to the subject of economy. So let us start our today's discussion. Now our today's discussion will involve 12 articles, so I'll be dealing with each and every article in detail so as to provide you with the necessary information that will help you not just clear prelims and mains examination but also to revise important articles that appeared in last month's newspaper. Now we start our today's discussion with the income transfer schemes. Now these income transfer schemes, they were all over the news primarily because of the elections that happened in Delhi and Maharashtra, and we saw in these elections one of the important promises that all the political parties made was that we'll provide you with some kind of money which will act as an income support. So let us try to understand the benefits and challenges in implementing such schemes and what is the ideal way forward. Should we or should we not implement these schemes? Now, as I told you, the context of this article that around 15 states in our India right now, they are implementing these income support schemes in one form or the other. And most of these schemes, they are invariably targeting women and marginalized section of the society. Now, these cash transfers, these are unconditional in nature. First of all, you have to understand that these transfers, these are made to all the women in the society, irrespective of the fact that whether they are rich or whether they are poor. That is what unconditional transfer means. Now let us first of all understand the current situation. As I told you, around 15 states in India, they are providing these income transfer schemes and they are targeting about 60% of India's women population. Now in terms of economic burden that the government is having this because of this kind of income transfer, it amounts to about 2 lakh crore rupees, which in terms of $1 billion, it is $25 billion, which is a large amount of money. Now, most of these schemes, they are directly made or they are transferred directly into the bank account of women, which is through the process of direct benefit transfer or DBT. And this is disbursed to over 5.5 lakh crore of amount of rupees. And this has been done to 70 crore women in general. Now, the examples of this scheme you can quote, there are many examples, largely Lakshmi Yojana, which is a scheme of Madhya Pradesh where it all started with, and there are other similar schemes such as KCR Kit scheme, which was earlier implemented by the previous Chief Minister of the Telangana, which provided for a financial assistance to women in their post-pregnancy period, right? So, these are the examples of such schemes that have been implemented in many states. Now, there was this important scheme that was in news called as Ladki Behan Yojana or Ladli Behan Yojana, which was implemented in Maharashtra, right? So, please make sure to quote such examples in your mains answer writing. Now, let us understand first of all many arguments that highlight why we need to provide women or why we need to give people of India some amount of money into their bank accounts, that is through income transfer. First of all, I told you most of the schemes invariably target women, and the intention of this is to actually empower women. That is, by providing them with cash, the women will have agency in their own family. That family members right now, we have seen that they do not respect women so much because most women, they are not working. But when they'll have a steady source of income, be it through these income transfer, it will not just improve their position in their family, but overall on a society base, it will lead to empowerment of the women, that they will have more say in their family's decision making. They can actually decide where and how their children can get educated, and they can also make important decisions relating to their family aspects, like when to have pregnancy and how much kids should they bear. So, these kind of decisions. That is why first of all it empowers women. Second factor, it tries to remove poverty, that is try to alleviate poverty. Now, we have understood that there is what is called as feminization of poverty in India, that most of the people who are vulnerable, especially women, they are belonging to poor section of the society. So, once if you think you are providing them with some kind of monthly income through these income transfer, that will help not just deal with empowerment issues, but they will also help them to sustain their livelihood and provide for a steady source of income. That is why I am telling you it helps in removing or alleviating poverty. Now, there is also an economic aspect to it, that once you provide income to people in India, it will increase the money supply in the economy, and by having cash in their hand, you can understand people will start spending it on buying goods and services. So, that invariably will boost consumptions level in the economy, and in a larger way, it will promote GDP growth of our country. That is why I told you such kind of a Income transfer support, it not just boosts consumption, but it leads to economic or multiplier effect. What do I mean by multiplier effects? For example, I told you there will be increased consumption among people, that they will want goods and services, right? So the companies, they will need to increase the supply of goods and services that are in demand in the market. So by increasing the supply, it will not just create more jobs, it will increase GDP, and it will also create more employment in general. So not just your growth is taken care of, but you are providing invariably more employment to the people of India. So this is what multiplier effect means, that you're providing cash in hand. People who are having this cash will be buying goods and services in the market, and then naturally the companies will have to increase the supply of these goods and services. And how will they do it? By increasing investments in their own company, by providing more employment so as to manufacture these goods and services. So this is what multiplier effect means. Also, what we have seen, that these income transfer scheme, they highlight efficiency in governance, that rather than providing them with subsidies, you are just directly transferring money into your account. So this not just reduces leakages, but it has increased efficiency in terms of direct transfer. Also, by having cash in hand, you understand people might be having different needs. Someone might be needing it to buy crops or buy food for them, whereas other section of the population will spend it on health or education related purposes, right? But this is only possible when you're providing them with cash and not just the exact benefits. So this is how it provides individual the flexibility of spending, that whatever they need, they can buy it using that money which has been transferred into their bank account. So these are these arguments that highlight why we need to transfer these money directly into the bank account, that it not just empowers women, it reduces the poverty in women, it boosts consumption which has economic multiplier effect, it leads to efficiency in governance, and it provides people the flexibility on what type of an item they want to buy with these money, right? Now let us try to understand significant drawbacks or disadvantages of these schemes. First of all, the most highlighted aspect is the fiscal burden. Now you understand the states will have to secure financing so as to transfer this money into the bank accounts of individual. Now it has been estimated, I told you, that about 5.5 lakh crore rupees has been spent by states up till now so as to transfer these amount of money into the bank accounts of individuals. So this is a huge fiscal burden on any government. Now you understand, states, they already have a very stressed fiscal balance or their financial balance, and that is why when they are transferring additional amount which is expected to increase further, it will produce or it will impose an additional fiscal burden on the state. Then when you increase the money supply in the economy, it also creates a chance that there will be high inflationary pressures in the economy, because you are increasing money supply which will promote consumption, and in case the supply of these items which are being demanded, if it not increases, it will lead to inflationary pressures in the economy. Then you can also argue that such measures, they are short term in focus, that the larger problem that exists in your society is that lack of poverty or presence of poverty, lack of educational and health benefits. So you're not providing or constructing these infrastructure, rather you're just providing them with money with a short term focus, and it does not address the larger structural reforms that is needed in the economy, that is rationalization of subsidy or providing health and educational facilities by the government. So these are the largest structural reforms that could have been done, and instead the government is spending its hard-earned money on undertaking such schemes which have a short-term focus. Further, it creates a large section of population who will become dependent on the money which is sent by the government, and rather than working in somewhere and earning their money themselves, they will be dependent entirely on the government support. Also, there are arguments that there is inefficiency in targeting, as you are providing benefits to every woman, especially to the richer women who do not need 1 or 2,000 rupees in their bank account. So this highlights that this is not entirely efficient in nature. Rather, you could have given this benefits just to people who need it. That is why it imposes a huge fiscal burden on the government. Understood? So these are the set of arguments that you can quote that highlights the disadvantages or drawbacks of such important schemes. Now let us try to understand what or how can you make this scheme a much better or an efficient scheme? First of all, is that you need a calibrated implementation, that rather than spending the entire money on the entire section of population, you needed a better targeting mechanism that only provides the money to poor and the marginalized section and not to everybody. Understood? So this is how you can calibrately implement it. Also, you are providing other benefits to people like subsidies on fertilizer, food, etc. So why don't you rationalize these benefits and then instead provide them with the option to get income transfer, which they can use to buy these goods and services in the market, right? Then you also need to focus on complementary policies. For example, as I've told you, women who are in their pregnancy period, they are being provided the benefit. So you can use this benefit, or the women who are in their pregnancy, they can use this benefit to attain or to get tested in the health centers or to get medicines for themselves. So that is why you're not just providing them with the money, but you're also focusing on maternal health, right? So similarly, other benefits can also be extended, which complements the entire development of a human being, not just provides them with hard-earned cash. Also, you need to ensure fiscal discipline, because this method, if you have to continue, you have to sustain it through your financing itself, right? So fiscal deficit or fiscal discipline is very important, that you have to keep your borrowings low and also increase the income sources such as tax and non-tax revenue, so as to get the money which you will eventually spend on income transfer scheme. Also, such income transfer scheme needs to be assessed periodically through a test called as impact assessment, that whether or not we are providing money to, say, women, is it really leading to their empowerment, or is it really preventing them to get into the poverty levels? So you have to understand the assessment and then you can calibrate it according to your own wishes. Also, you have to encourage other women-centric initiatives. Like I told you, there are many benefits that you can provide for improving maternal health, for improving child health, for improving their societal position. So these kind of communication, information and other schemes can also be implemented along with income transfer scheme, so as to make these schemes more effective and efficient in nature. Understood? So this was all our discussion related to income transfer scheme. And let us now move to the another article which appeared in the Indian Express newspaper. Now this article actually appeared due to the fact that there is an ongoing crisis in Bangladesh. Now you understand, Bangladesh is a key textile manufacturer as well as exporter. Now if there is an economic crisis or a political crisis which is going on in Bangladesh, so you understand the conditions of business there is not so optimum or not so desirable, right? So this article actually provides you with the insight that due to economic crisis in Bangladesh, it provides India the opportunity to get its textile manufacturing sector sorted. Understood? So this actually provides India the opportunity that the companies who might decide to move out of Bangladesh, they can instead be relocated into India, which will, by capturing just the 10% of Bangladeshi apparel exports, India can directly create 5 lakh jobs and indirectly create 10 lakh jobs, so as to provide employment opportunities to Indian youth, right? So this is the context of this article. Now, why this article actually came about, as I told you, Bangladesh is currently facing tightened economic condition. Most of it is due to the sharp depletion in Bangladeshi foreign exchange reserves. Now, you understand, any country has foreign exchange reserves, which leads to controlling the amount of its domestic currency with respect to foreign currency, right? And Bangladesh, in order to manufacture large number of textile, it is dependent on imports of raw cotton and cotton fabric from other countries, right, including India. Now, if its forex exchange reserve is depleting, it will not allow Bangladesh to have a sufficient import cover. So in that case, it is facing challenges in importing cotton and fabric from various different countries, including India. And this crisis in general provides you with the knowledge that Bangladeshi textile industry is not so well off right now. So this gives India the opportunity so as to allow or to set up the manufacturing units which are earlier located in Bangladesh in its own territory. Now, why is actually Bangladesh a top textile manufacturer and exporter? You have to understand, there are various advantages that the Bangladesh economy has. First of all, that it provides low wages to the employees in textile factories. That is why the total cost of apparel manufactured in Bangladesh, it is low. Also, it is a least developed country and it is given a status in the Western countries which allow many countries to provide zero duties on the imports which it's done from Bangladesh. So, overall cost of Bangladeshi apparels when it reaches Western markets, it is very low as compared to developing countries like India and China. That is why Bangladesh has a distinct cost advantage due to low input cost and zero taxation on its imports in Western countries. Now, Bangladesh, it enjoys about 10 to 15% cost advantage over India. And this in India's case is because India's labor laws are not so well off, and that is why countries face compliance based challenges. And also India has a problem of union, which increases the cost or overall cost of operations of any company in India. That is why India does not have a cost advantage, rather it is Bangladesh which costs its apparel 10 to 15% lower than India. And naturally, you can understand that is why the cost of Bangladeshi apparels are low. They will be sold much higher. They will be sold in much higher numbers into the developed countries, right? So that is why there are many suggestions which have been given in the article. First of all is that we need to improve and upgrade the existing infrastructure to allow exports. We need to construct ports, we need to construct road infrastructure so as to travel or to allow logistics from factories to reach ports and eventually they can be exported. Also, we need to expand the capacity of our textile sector, and for that we need to provide them with the benefits under PLI scheme. Also, we need to improve the technology of the textile units so as to allow micro industries particularly to develop or have newer machines which can shorten their production cycles, and hence we can manufacture large quantities in shorter time. Also, many Indian products, they will be subjected to environmental, social and governance based compliances in developed markets, particularly Europe and Western countries. So as to allow or fulfill India or Indian products with those compliance measures, we also need to take certain measures. Also, we need to reduce custom duties on imports that we do, especially the textile machinery, so as to allow the companies to manufacture these textile products at a much lower rate, right? So, all of these measures can be taken in order to improve the capacity of the companies by undertaking technological upgradation, in undertaking expansion of our infrastructure, in order to make these companies comply with environmental and safety and social regulations, and also reduce the custom duties that we impose on raw materials and also on machinery. We can keep the cost of manufacturing in India low, and hence we can compete with countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh, right? Now let us move to another article. This article actually highlights that income disparity in India or income inequality, it has actually reduced in financial year 2023. But despite this, top 10% still holds a large share in national income of India. Now to measure inequality, we have see what is called as a Gini index, right? What is Gini index? I'll tell you in the subsequent slides. Now, India's economic journey, it reflects a seesaw pattern in inequality that we have seen. There are times when inequality increases in India, whereas in some times, as we have seen recently, inequality can actually reduce. Now, the amount of inequality that exists in any economy for that matter, it is measured by an index called as Gini index. And this Gini index highlights that India's inequality, it reduced post-independence. As earlier it was 0.463, it reduced to 0.367. However, during COVID-19 and its resulted pandemic and disruption, we saw this inequality increased to 0.506. And since COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen reduction in economic inequality. So I told you, right, it is measured by Gini index. So let us try to find out what is this Gini index. Now, this Gini index, it actually measures the extent or the amount of inequality and the distribution of inequality in the country. And it measures inequality by understanding the differences in income as well as consumption patterns among individuals and how it differentiates on how it deviates from the perfect inequality. Now, using this graph, you can understand this straight line here. It identifies that a country is a perfectly equal country, that in terms of income and in terms of consumption, everything is equal. However, this curve highlights the measure or the distance from this line, and this is a measure of inequality. So, larger is this red portion, the higher will be the inequality in any country. So, this is also known as Lorenz curve, whereas this entire index is called as Gini index, right? So if the Gini index is 0, that is this perfect straight line, it highlights there exists a perfect inequality. Whereas if Gini index is 100, that is this straight line, you will highlight that there is a perfect inequality in the country. Whereas in practice, we have seen inequality is between these two lines. So greater is this red portion, you can understand higher will be the inequality. And if we have to reduce inequality, we have to reduce this red portion by a significant margin, right? Now, this article also highlights that there is a decline in Gini index from 0.506 in 2021 to 0.410 in 2023. And why actually India's inequality reduced? It was through government policies like Manrega, which provides for 100 days labor to non-skilled workers in the rural area, through direct benefit transfers, as government provides many benefits directly into the bank account of people, which increases their income monthly and also reduces the inequality. Also, government has undertaken many financial inclusion initiatives like opening bank account or providing them benefits directly into the bank account using JAM, that is Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile, and this has increased the share of income in the bottom 50 half of the India's population. Right. So these are the measures that you can utilize in your answer by highlighting that these measures have allowed India to reduce its inequality. Now, what is further needed is that you need to invest in education, healthcare and infrastructure. By investing in education, you can make people educated, literate as well as skilled. By undertaking developments in healthcare sector, you can reduce their spending on healthcare obligations and make them much healthy individual, which will allow them to get educated better. And also by constructing infrastructure, you are preventing or you are presenting a much more higher prospects for Indian economy to grow. And also by constructing infrastructure, you will be providing employment to people, which will also reduce inequality. Further, what we need is to provide social security benefits to many people who are excluded currently, be it informal sector workers, gig workers or senior citizens. We can provide them with social security so as to allow them the benefits even if they are not working. Also, by going forward with the progressive taxation, which means increase in taxation as your income increases, we can further reduce the amount of inequality in India, right? So this is all for today's discussion on equality. And then we move to another article. This article actually appeared as a debate on Indian Express newspaper, and it highlights the benefit of price deficiency payment system. Now, what is price deficiency payment system? For example, if the MSP of any crop is rupees 60 and if it is available in the market for rupees 45, right? So what if farmers are selling it in open market instead of selling it to government on MSP? So it will be incurring a loss of 15 rupees, right? So what if the government compensates this 15 rupees to farmer? Eventually, what you are providing them with price deficiency payments. And this is what price deficiency payment is. So to allow these kind of payments, first of all, there are many benefits. That first of all, it will formalize the agricultural markets in India, that now farmers will demand for bills from the sellers of or from the buyers of agricultural commodities. And also the digitization efforts that the government is wanting to do in the agricultural sector, it will also be promoted, as the markets now will be keeping tabs on how much amount or how much money they are spending on procuring these commodities, and hence the government can use these data to provide price deficiency payments to the farmers. Also, many markets can be set up outside physical market yards also, so that the farmers have to travel lesser amount of distance to sell their crops, and hence these kind of the benefits that are expected to have once the government implements price deficiency payment system in all likelihood. However, there are many challenges. That what if farmers and traders they collude, that instead of selling it on market price for 45, what if the farmers are selling their crops just for 30 rupees, knowing well that the government will compensate them with the rest 30 rupees. However, eventually it is the government who will be at the loss, that it will have to transfer larger amount of money per farmer just because of this collusion between farmers and traders. Also, it might hit financial exchequer, as the amount or the government is not liable to pay any MSP right now if the transaction happens in open market, but rather than providing price deficiency payment, the government will have to pay every deficient payment even in the case if it is happening outside the APMC market. So the overall financial burden on the government is expected to increase due to this price deficiency payment, and this is a challenge that the governments will eventually have to face, right? Now let us move to another article. This article actually appeared in the explain section of the Indian Express, and it states that the US government, or the earlier government that was outgoing led by President Biden, it imposed certain sanctions on the shadow fleets of Russian based crude oil vessels so as to prevent them from transporting crude oil to various countries. Now let us understand the context of this article. Now while demitting the office, President Biden announced a new sweeping curbs on Russian oil imports, and also he imposed sanctions on 183 tankers that was earlier used by Russia so as to transport the crude oil to different countries like India. Now there was this sanction that was imposed on Russia, especially after the Russia-Ukraine war. However, in order to not disrupt the supply of crude oil, there were certain exemptions that were given. One of these exemptions was that the earlier hitherto rather dormant vessels that were not used by Russia back then, it were allowed to export crude oil to different countries. But now even the shadow fleet of tankers have now been under the sanctions regime. Now this actually impacts India because recently India is one of the biggest importers of Russia based crude oil. Because how will now India import Russian crude oil? Because the shadow fleet tankers that were delivering these crude oil to India have now been banned. So this is the context of this article. Now India, you have to understand, it is world's third largest consumer of crude oil, as it needs or it requires 85% of its domestic demand, or it fulfills these demand by importing crude oil. This sometimes has even reached to the levels of 87 to 88%. Now originally Russia was just a marginal supplier of crude oil. Rather, India sourced crude oil needs from Middle Eastern countries like Iraq, from Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. But after West imposed sanctions on Russia due to its war with Ukraine, Russia had no other option but to reduce the prices of its crude oil. So that is why India saw an opportunity and started importing the cheaper crude oil from Russian markets. And after the war, we have seen that the share of Russia's crude oil in India's imports, it increased to an extent that it now became 38% nearly in the year 2024. So this is how India's dependence on Russian crude oil, it increased. However, to control or why this crude oil started to happen, you have to understand, or you have to go back in time. First of all, when West imposed sanctions on Russia, it put a price cap on the cap, or based on the price based on which Russia can sell its crude oil. For example, this cap was $60 per barrel. For example, Russia cannot sell crude oil over and above the price of $60 per barrel. Now, the idea of this cap was actually to allow Russia to export some of its crude oil while maintaining a steady supply of crude oil, whereas keeping the prices low, it will not allow Russia to make significant profits of it, because the West feared that using the profits it made out of exporting crude oil, Russia can use this money to undertake expansion in the war between Ukraine and Russia, right? Now, India was not directly a part of sanction scheme, so it was allowed to import crude oil from Russia, right? But what happened that Russia, instead of using its own designated tankers, it tried or it used the services of a shadow fleet of aging tankers that emerged largely to dodge the Western price caps on oil. Now, Indian refiners, it bought Russian oil based on delivered basis, and these sanctioned tankers together handled more than 530 million barrels of Russia crude oil export, about 230 million barrels of which reached Indian markets. So this is how Russia tried to circumvent the sanctions by utilizing the shadow fleet of tankers, and it allowed it to export its crude oil to markets like China and India. Now that the US has imposed a ban on these shadow fleets also, what Russia can do is to rapidly increase the construction of its newer tankers. However, you understand this will take some amount of time. Till then, it has to export its crude oil below the levels of $60 per barrel. But now, what option does India have? Now, what India can do is actually it can navigate to other sources also, or it can utilize the services of its traditional suppliers of oil like Iraq, Saudi Arabia and UAE. So India is trying to diversify it again back or away from Russia to its more traditional suppliers like Iraq, Saudi Arabia and UAE, right? So this is how the today's article was all about. Now next article that we are dealing with today is about the securities transaction tax collection, because as per the latest report, India's security transaction tax collection has increased by over 75% into the previous financial year. And this was despite the fact that India increased securities transaction tax on various commodities like futures and options, which are an option or derivatives of security. Now this increase in STT was done so as to prevent people from undertaking trade in these commodities, as they are very volatile in nature. But today our subject of our discussion is actually what is this securities transaction tax. So let us try to understand what is this securities transaction tax. It is an example of direct tax which is levied on purchase and sale of securities like stocks as well as equities. Now this is levied and collected by central government, and the liability of applying the STT is actually on the broker. When the transaction happens in the stock market, it is actually the broker which will deduct the tax on your behalf and submit it to the government. Now the rates and charges of securities transaction tax, it varies, depends upon what kind of equity or security you are dealing with. As I told you, the securities which are volatile in nature like futures and options, they have a higher STT, whereas the normal stocks that have appeared in the market, they have a lower STT, right? So this is what STT is all about. Now STT, or it is levied as per the provisions of Securities Transaction Act 2004, and it is specifically on listed transaction on which the STT are liable. Now these taxable securities, they include equities, derivatives or even equity oriented mutual funds, as these are to be liable to pay security transaction tax. But you have to also understand these are not applicable to off market transactions and also on the commodity and currency based transactions that happen in the equity markets in India. Now the rates of these taxation, they are different for different types of securities, as I've already told you. Now let us move to another article. This one actually said, or it debates about the fact whether or not income support schemes to farmers are actually beneficial or not, right? Now we have seen a popular income support scheme to farmers, that is PM Kisan Yojana, as this provides 6,000 rupees annually to all the farmers in India, and this is provided in 3 installments of rupees 2,000 each. So this is how you can transfer the amount or income directly to farmers instead of providing them with the benefits such as subsidy benefits. So this article debates about this particular fact, that is, instead of guaranteeing MSP or legalizing MSP, what the government can do is actually increase the amount of money it spends on the income support scheme. So let us try to understand, first of all, why is there a need for income support scheme? Because we understand farmers are a very marginalized section of population, and to undertake credit efforts or to undertake their capacity expansion in farming, they are currently dependent not on institutional credit but on informal sources of credit like local money lenders. But on the other hand, noticing the vulnerability of these farmers, the local money lenders, they charge higher interest rates to farmers. Thereby, we have seen that farmers, they are quite stressed when they have to pay the money back to local money lenders, and this is all because of the fact they do not have access to institutional credit, which is credit provided by banks, NBFCs, etc. So instead of depending on institutional credit or local money lenders, the government is intending to provide them with the income support scheme so as to it reduces their dependence on informal money lenders. Also, by providing them with the money, the government wants them to enhance their agricultural investment, because once they increase their agricultural investment, it will eventually reduce or it will increase the productivity of the farmer activities and eventually leading to increase in yields of the crops. Now it is understood that these kind of income support schemes, these are more effective than subsidies, because subsidies, they are provided to every commodity and they are provided on every sale of the commodity. So naturally, if the large farmer, they are procuring 50 bags of fertilizer, they are liable to get subsidies on all these 50 bags of fertilizer. Whereas on the other hand, small farmers, if they are procuring just 5 bags of fertilizer, they will be getting lesser amount of subsidy from the government. So this overall is a very regressive amount of subsidy that invariably it benefits the large farmers. However, if we want to make it more effective, we can just transfer a same amount of money to every farmer so as to do away with the need of depending on subsidies, and it is a more effective nature. Also, these subsidies are crop neutral in nature, so farmers who are growing any crop, they'll be eligible to get these income transfers. Whereas subsidies, we have seen that farmers, they are using more urea just because there is more subsidy on that urea, and that creates a whole sorts of different problem. Also, these income support schemes, they are exempted from the WTO subsidy limit, which is done under the amber box subsidy regime, because other forms of subsidy like food subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, they are all subjected to various limitations as per the WTO norms of Agreement of Agriculture. Whereas this WTO Agreement of Agriculture, it provides that countries can provide indefinite amount of income support without the need of any limits. So that is why not just we are providing farmers with more benefits, but eventually for India also, it provides that there is no limit that it will be subjected to as per the WTO norms. Now let us understand, there are some issues with these subsidy or with these income support schemes also. First of all is that the amount that is provided currently by the government, that is rupees 6,000, it is not a sufficient amount, because what happens today's world, in 6,000 rupees, farmers will not be able to buy sufficient amount of input with these 6,000 rupees, and that is why this support is not adequate. Further, there is many differences or leakages in identification and coverages of benefits, as PM Kisan, it does not provide any benefit to landless labor. It does not provide any benefit to sharecroppers. And these type of farmers, they are present in large number in India's agricultural sector. So that is why the coverage of this scheme is not sufficient, and also the identification, which is based on the SECC and land records. You understand, land records in India, they are in a very sorry state. So that is why when the government will not be able to identify who are the eligible farmers, and if they are not providing benefits to landless and sharecroppers, you understand, the benefits are not available to every farming individual. Also, there are inefficiency in disbursement, because many amount of money which is provided to farmers, it can be given also to people who are not engaged in agriculture, rather they have sublet their properties to another sharecropper. And also, the cost of inputs in recent times, their prices have risen. For example, there was this increase in prices of diammonium phosphate, which is an important fertilizer. So what if you are just providing them with 6,000 rupees, but if the cost of inputs are increasing, invariably the farmer will be able to buy lesser amount of inputs per the benefit that is provided by the government. Also, there are many allegations that instead of using it for productive purposes, farmers are rather buying alcohol and tobacco related products with the same money that the government is originally providing them for farming related activities, right? So these are the problems that highlight that although these are quite effective in nature, but the coverage, support, they are quite inefficient or insufficient in nature. So let us understand, what do we need to do in order to make these income support schemes more efficient and effective. First of all is that we need to digitize the land records, because by digitizing land record, we will able to identify land owning farmers and what kind of land they own. Accordingly, we can provide them with the necessary benefits. Also, we can use e-vouchers. For example, a sufficient amount of money should be provided, but it should be said that these money can only be used to buy fertilizers. Similarly, we can do so in need for seeds or in need for technological adoption. So the leakages of this money and to be used or to allow farmers to buy instead alcohol with this money will be removed. Also, we need to create enabling infrastructure so as to reduce the dependence of farmers on informal sources of credit. We also need to improve the input use efficiency so that the farmers, they do not misuse the inputs like water, urea or fertilizers, etc. Rather, only the right amount of inputs can be used by farmers, which will help keep the costs of agriculture low, and invariably it will increase the effectiveness of such limited amount of benefits that are provided under the income support scheme, right? Now let us move to another article. This article actually talks about the Trump's tariff and how these are threatening the other developing countries like India and China. But first you have to understand the context of this article, and the context lies in the fact that Trump, when he was seeking his re-election as the president of United States, he promised many things, and the most important highlight of his promises was that the countries with which US has a trade deficit, Trump will start imposing tariffs on them. First target was China, and understand India will also be a target because India has a trade surplus with US, whereas with respect to US, it has a trade deficit with India. So let us understand what are these tariffs all about. Now these tariffs, these are an example of import duties that US levies on imports from other countries. Understood? Now the import or the imposition of these tariffs are intended to counter the flow of cheaper imports which are there in US. Now these cheaper imports in US, it affects US economy in various ways. First of all, for consumers, it provides them with the access to cheaper items. However, in terms of US's economy, it is quite detrimental to it because cheaper options, when they are coming from India and China, it will not promote the same articles to be manufactured in US. Rather, the US manufacturing firms, they will lose out because of their low sales, and also because of the imports that has happening from other countries, and if these imports increase, it will increase US's trade deficit with that country. Now what is trade deficit? It is the difference between imports and exports. So understand, if imports increase, it will increase the trade deficit also. Now why does US want to impose tariff? First of all, it wants to protect its domestic industry because we have seen particularly in the automobile sector, as the automobiles, they started to be manufactured in countries like China and Mexico. The US's domestic automobile industry is facing certain pressure. Also, US has a big trade deficit with countries like China and India, and it wants to reduce this trade deficit so as that it is increasing the cost of imports by imposing tariffs on them. Also, it will allow the US government to raise tax revenue, as more imports or more tariffs means more taxes on imports, which will lead to higher income for the US government, and it will force Chinese manufacturers, just because of the fact that their imports will be imposed tariffs with, they will have to set up a factory inside US so as to circumvent these tariffs. So not just US wants to protect its domestic industry, but it wants these other countries to set up their manufacturing units not in their own countries but rather in US. So this is the intention of imposing tariffs by US government. Now let us understand how these tariffs can result into the different scenarios in US market. First of all, if any country, or for example China, it witnesses higher tariff on its goods that are exported to US, it has many options. First of all, it can pass on the tariff cost to the consumer, which will lead to increased inflation in the US market. Also, China, what it can do, it can reduce the prices of these goods, thereby negating the impact of increased tariff, thereby it is leading to dumping of goods. Further, it can reroute its trades through other countries, for example, sourcing it through other countries on which the US government has not imposed tariffs and sanctions, and that is why through the process of rerouting, it can actually reroute its imports without the need of imposing of higher tariffs. Further, it can engage in trade war with US by imposing a retaliatory tariffs on goods that are imported from US and into China. And also it can undertake various signing of trade agreements with US so as to reduce the amount of tariff that are imposed on Chinese goods. Further, what China can do is that it can diversify export markets, that instead of sending goods to US, it can start sending it to India and other countries, so as to negate the entire effect that the tariffs might impose on countries like China. So these are the options that the country may have in case US decides to impose tariff on its own good, and you can understand several implications are also applicable on Indian context also, right? Now let us move to another article. This article actually talks about meme coins. Now what are meme coins? Meme coins are actually cryptocurrency which blend internet humor with the cryptocurrencies, and these currencies that have appeared like Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, these are inspired by online memes. Now these kind of cryptocurrencies can be created by anyone using the launch platforms like Solana blockchain and Ethereum, and the Trump meme coin that is very prevalent now, it was hosted on the Solana blockchain. Now these kind of meme coins, these are listed on decentralized exchanges, and the prices that actually changes based on their factors like demand and supply, like every commodity, right? Now you have to understand these meme coins, they do not have an intrinsic value as against our currency notes which have the backing of the might of the sovereign government. These meme coins actually are a commodity which is produced out of thin air. So that is why they do not have any inherent or intrinsic economic value, and their value is derived solely on their perception or their popularity. More is the popularity, more will be the demand, and higher will be the prices of such meme coins, right? But what if the demand of these commodities reduce? Eventually the prices will also crash. Now creators, they give the meme coin liquidity by establishing a liquidity pool which has certain amount of meme coins, and it is also consisting of a certain amount of fixed cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which allows the creators to peg the value of meme coin originally. And after that the value is pegged, the value of these meme coins can change depending upon the factors of demand and supply, right? Now the market cap of these meme coins are determined value of each coin multiplied by the total value of these meme coins that are available in the market. As they do not have any underlying asset, so that is why your market value can only be assessed based on the factors of demand and supply. Now the creators, what they do is to popularize these meme coins. They create a brand out of these meme coins by attracting much more cult following, and as it is backed by such popular celebrities, the value of meme coins increased. For example, Dogecoin, its value increased manifold after Elon Musk backed that particular meme coin. So the value of meme coins can actually be pumped up through influencer marketing, through exploiting the hype, as we have seen in the past. Understood? Now these meme coins, you have to understand, these are not just an investment opportunity, rather these are also venues that are using or that are used for money laundering. As there are many liquidity pools that have been used, that creators create a meme coin, they allow investors to invest in the meme coins, and they eventually dump out their investments, leading to the crash of value, eventually erasing the entire investment of the retail investors. So that is why these are quite dangerous investment opportunities, that although they do not have any intrinsic value, and their value is entirely driven about the popularity of the people who are backing that meme coins and the factors of demand and supply. As they do not have an inherent value, there is also a chance that they can be used for money laundering and other tax related frauds, right? Now let us move to another article. This one actually talks about sachetization of mutual fund. Now what is the process of sachetization? Let me tell you with a simple example. Suppose you are in a market to buy a shampoo, the bottle of which costs about 400 rupees. But you understand, you might be fortunate enough to spend 400 rupees on a bottle of shampoo. But what about poor people? They won't have 400 rupees at their disposal, and even if they have it, they might use it for other purposes which are more important for them. But you also need to understand that poor people need to wash their head, right? So they have another option in the market, that instead of buying a 400 rupee bottle, the same shampoo is available in lesser quantities in sachets or in pouches. So they can use 1 or 2 rupee and they can buy these shampoo pouches and wash their heads with. So this is the process of sachetization, that instead of procuring larger quantities of the same good, that same quantity is available in form of sachets, which allows the pricing of that commodity to reduce and allow poor people to even buy these. So similar concept will now be applied to the mutual funds also, because currently the minimum amount of investment that you can do in a mutual fund, it is 500 rupees. Now the popularity of mutual fund in recent years, we have seen it has increased manifold, especially among the middle class investors. But the SEBI feels that even the popularity of mutual funds, although it has increased in middle class investors, but the poor people or the marginalized section of the society, they have not been able to participate in the mutual fund market. And because of that, SEBI feels that the value of minimum amount of investment to be made in mutual fund, it needs to reduce from 500 rupees to a lesser amount, say 250 rupees. So this is how the process of sachetization will happen in mutual funds. Now sachetization, as I told you, it will enable small ticket investments in mutual funds on a periodical basis, and this can assist the financial empowerment of the underserved section or the poor people who are actually unable to participate in the market of mutual funds right now. Also, SEBI, it has brought a consultation paper which wants SEBI to promote financial inclusion through the process of sachetization, and it has proposed that instead of 500 rupees, the minimum amount of investment should be brought to just 250 rupees. And to compensate companies for their loss, the mutual funds will try to compensate these through reduction in small ticket rates and reimburse them with the cost through the investor protection and educational awareness fund, right? Now, in order to reduce the misuse of these provisions, there are many people who will be allowed it. However, the existing mutual fund investors who have invested in high amounts in existing mutual funds, they will not be allowed to make investments. Only the fresh investments can be made, and maximum of 3 investments can be made in 250 rupees SIP each. Also, it may be offered under the growth option and investment option. However, mutual fund in volatile schemes such as small cap and mid cap security schemes will not be allowed in these small and sachetized mutual funds, right? So this is how the SEBI wants to promote financial inclusion, so as to allow even the poor people to invest in SIP for as low as 250 rupees each. And this is what the process of sachetization means in the mutual funds context, right? Now let us understand another article. This article actually highlighted that RBI, it wanted to inject liquidity into the banking system, and it did so by 3 measures such as forex swap, open market operation and variable repo rate. So let us individually understand what these 3 measures are and how does RBI actually injects liquidity with it. Now the context of this article is actually with this kind of a setup. RBI is looking to put $5 billion worth of liquidity through forex swap. It is undertaking open market operation for 6,000 crore rupees, as well as 56-day variable repo rate, so as to allow banks to have a sufficient amount of liquidity. And with this increased currency at their disposal, the banks can lend these money to the borrowers in general, right? So let us understand one by one. First of all, what is a forex swap? Now, forex swap is a simple example. Suppose RBI buys dollars from the banks and instead provides them with the rupee currency, right? So this is how the supply of rupee will be increased with the banks. Now, if RBI buys $5 billion worth of foreign currency from the banks, it will provide them with the equivalent amount of rupee that will likely to infuse about 4,000 or 43,000 crore rupees into the banking system. And after this forex swap matures, the bank will return the rupee amount to the RBI, and instead it will buy back the dollar value from it. Understood? So this is how RBI wants to infuse liquidity by purchasing forex from the banks and providing them with the equivalent amount of rupees. Now there is another measure called as open market operation. Open market operation refers to the selling and buying of government securities by the RBI. Now what if RBI buys government securities from the banks and it provides them with the necessary rupees as that regard? So this is how the RBI wants to increase the money supply by purchasing the government securities from the banks and providing them with the equivalent amount of rupees 6,000 crore. And this is how, using the open market operation, the RBI may purchase securities and it injects money into the banking system. The third operation is known as variable repo rate. Now, repo rate is the rate based on which the banks can borrow funds from the RBI. But there may be times that the repo rate is high and the banks would not want to borrow the money at the higher interest rate. So, in that case, the RBI says that instead of paying us the repo rate, why don't you provide us with the lesser amount of interest rates through the measure of variable repo rate? And hence, this improves the attractiveness of the loan option that the banks will have with the RBI, and naturally the banks will pay an interest rate which is less than repo rate. That is why this variable repo rate always is lesser than the repo rate. However, it should not be less than the reverse repo rate. So this lower amount of interest rates, it allows the banks to borrow funds from the RBI using the variable repo rate. And naturally, when banks borrow more funds from RBI, it can use it to lend it to more borrowers like loan seekers of you and I, right? So this is how, through open market operations, through forex swap as well as variable repo rate, what RBI wants to do, it wants to increase the money supply with the banks, that is increasing liquidity, and allow the banks to extend the same amount of money as loans to its customers. Now let us move to the last article of the day. This talks about small savings schemes, as the rate of it was unchanged for the current quarter from January to March. Now what is important for our exams perspective is actually what is these small savings schemes. Now the context of the small savings scheme, I told you the government has actually maintained a status quo, that it has not changed the rate of these small savings schemes, which are reset every quarter by the bank, and this small savings schemes include various options. Now let us understand what is this small savings schemes. These are actually central government managed savings schemes which are designed to encourage regular savings across all age groups. And these schemes are attractive because they offer higher return than the traditional instruments of banks like fixed deposit, saving banks accounts, and that is why they have historically been a very powerful option. Also, to encourage their adoption, the government has earlier extended various kind of tax incentives, such as under the old tax regime, which favors investment in public provident fund, right? Now, what are these small savings schemes? These can be categorized into three different categories. First are postal deposits like saving bank accounts, recurring deposit, time deposit that you open in post offices. These are also examples of small savings schemes. Also, government extends many saving certificates like National Savings Certificate or Kisan Vikas Patra, and also social security schemes like Public Provident Fund, Senior Citizen Saving Schemes. All of these are examples of small saving schemes. Now, the money that the government gets through the small saving schemes, it is credited under the public account of India, not under the consolidated fund of India. And the money, it's actually managed by Ministry of Finance under the National Small Saving Schemes Fund Rules 2001. And the money, it is held usually is used by government for its borrowing purposes, for example, covering the fiscal deficit. And the loans taken from MSF, they are more expensive in nature than forest borrowings. Therefore, it is expensive for the government, but government is providing you with the increased return so as to encourage the adoption or inculcate the habit of savings in its own population, right? So this is what today's discussion was all about. Stay tuned to our channel as we are in the process of uploading more videos for monthly current affairs January 2025. And until then, please keep watching, keep revising, and more importantly, keep analyzing.